Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm one of the lead developers behind Silmarillion Total War. Before we get the stream started here, I'm just going to go ahead, link it in the usual places. You can let me know if my audio is okay. Don't want my music to be too loud, but it seems like it's alright on my little mixer here. It'll just be a few minutes here before we get everything underway. And today we're going to be talking about the new update that's coming. So, just to clarify things, the update is not going to be available right this very second. I am on the cusp of releasing it to my testers, and then we're going to continue to play around with that in the future. But once a few more people start to gather in here, then I'll be able to start talking a little bit more about some of our plans for the new year and some of the new things that you can expect to see in Silmarillion Total War. There's going to be a lot of interaction, I think, between unit design and map design. Those two things are going to be intrinsically linked, even more so than they already were. And we'll talk about that in just a moment here. Just going to take me a few moments here to get everything ready to go. So yeah, I appreciate your patience. Hello Windy Pops, hello Smosh, thanks for joining me. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes here. I think I've got everything linked in all the places that it needs to be linked. And so, let's talk a little bit about what you can expect to see in our new update. So you've probably noticed here that I'm going to be playing with maps a little bit. And this, with the new overhaul to missile units, is going to be something that really goes hand in hand, I think. We had one of our map makers make a map that had a whole bunch of mud on it. I will be showing you a match on there, and that's going to make it a little bit clear why this has influenced me so much. But looking at the way that he applied mud to the map, it really made me realize that there's a lot that we can do with putting that sort of terrain into our maps, and the way that it changes the dynamic of like how games play out and what strategies you employ, what unit types more particularly that you employ, is actually pretty profound. And it's a small change, but it does shake things up in a lot of different ways. So, to wit, I will be changing a lot of our maps such that they include more mud like this. And we're also going to be playing around with the way that our skirmishers are overhauled. So I'm going to be adding a new classification of mid-range skirmisher into the game. Those are going to be harassment javelins. The basic idea behind them is that they have very low damage. They currently have about 2 damage, but they do have about double the ammunition of our regular javelin units we've had in the mod up until this point. They also do increase the range by a fairly significant amount. It's about a 25% increase in range, 50% increase in damage, and about a 75 or so percent decrease in damage, rather, and a 50% increase in range, and or a 50% increase in ammunition. Wow, really tripping over my words here. So the end result is less damage, more ammo, greater range. And to that end, we'll be adding some extra units into the mod as well. Finarfin is going to be getting some new stuff, and the way that their detachments are going to work is going to be a little bit different. That's all going to be kind of in line with the way that we make these changes. So I'm just going to continue doing my thing here. let's go down here. We want swamp terrain. I thought this would be kind of worth streaming about a little bit, because there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions in the way that terrain and terrain bonuses are handled, and how I kind of approach that when it comes to map making and unit creation and statistics and things like that. So I'm on the Brithiac map, which I don't know if you guys have seen yet, but you will see quite a lot of it in its older form very, very shortly. But there's a lot of different types of terrain in here. So you're going to see dirt, you're going to see mud and swamp and things like that. And the important thing to note about mud and swamp terrain is that it does quite dramatically slow down units that move through it. And so that's going to give units like, say, the new harassment javelins, missiles, and light infantry in particular, something of an advantage over heavy infantry, because currently light infantry is just kind of there. It can be like useful, but that's not really because of the nature of light infantry themselves. It's more like down from unit to unit. So adding more kind of difficult terrain like this, it does give light infantry, I think, a really important role in that they'll be able to outmaneuver heavy infantry. You'll be able to get around them, get your flanking attacks off more easily, use some of the new missiles and stuff like that that they can take advantage of. Hello, Kamul. Thanks for joining us, man. And just things like that. So it will help carve out, I think, more of a niche for light infantry, and it is going to really change the way that I think a lot of battles end up playing out. Now, not all maps are going to play this way, because I don't want to necessarily just ruin the way that rush armies work, and I don't want to phase out rush armies just by adding this terrain kind of generally and making that a ubiquitous feature of all the maps that we have. No, very much not the case. But this will be added to, I think, about 5 maps. The ones that I have pegged for it currently are a few maps you haven't seen. Some of them are newer. But I do have some other maps like the Grove of Ungoliant, which is not particularly new. Nantathrin and the Plains of Tupalad, both of which are free-for-all matches. And I think that when it comes down to free-for-alls, that's going to really kind of change the way that people play those games. You'll be able to play with a mobility harassment army. And we're going to be experimenting a little bit more with scored resolution and stuff like that, and see how that can work out, so that when it comes to your free-for-all games, they'll play a little bit more like Warhammer games, where you're privileged for like getting into combat more quickly and dealing damage, and there's going to be a point system that's accumulated over time that the game already has built into it. And I think that'll help make free-for-alls a lot more interesting, not just in the way that you position troops and move them around the field, but also in terms of, a lot of people don't like free-for-alls because there's always the case where someone sits back, right? Now if that person sits back, even if they're the last person standing, you know, they won't actually win the game. You're not rewarded for being passive. You're actually rewarded for being aggressive and for seeking out good engagements and using your mobility to get kills. And I think that that's going to really play into a lot of the ways that we're changing light infantry and skirmishers generally. But before we move on here, and I start going through the various maps and kind of showing off what you can expect, do you have any questions so far? I don't have too many people in. I only got about 6 or so. Hello, Safi. Welcome. But yeah, do you guys have any questions about the implementation of those changes? Or maybe I wasn't completely clear. I was kind of tripping over the exact percentages for a little bit there. But if you guys have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them for you. Let's see here. Yeah, we're still on Swamp. So what I'm doing with this particular section of the map is that I want to make it just a little bit harder to kind of move through the ruin areas, so that it sort of balances out the fact that you have these ruins, that you have all these little areas that you can use to protect yourself. It's just sort of a trade-off, right? So when you get into the ruins, you'll have that, but you'll also not be able to move as quickly, and therefore you won't be able to react to threats as efficiently. Which I think is an interesting way of constructing this side of the map. Because right now it's kind of bare in terms of terrain. Like I did sort of the basic idea of what I wanted with this map, but outside of that, it's just mostly, it's like grassy plains with extra stuff. So that's something that I want to change here. And I think mud is a good way to do it, but of course I also want it to look good. bit smaller. No, I think that's okay for what it is now. So one of the things you can do when you're in the map editors, you can try and blend your terrain together. It looks a hell of a lot better when you're playing, when you don't have these big, like, obviously, like, square patches of that sort of indicate that you've gone over in a terrain editor. You kind of want to avoid that, I think, if you have any sort of, like, conception of craftsmanship. So that being said, when you're doing this kind of thing, you want to be able to recognize what terrain is what, right? So you can probably see the difference here, and this will be important for you when it comes time for interested parties such as yourselves to play on these maps, is that kind of look at the difference between the two. This one's much lighter, there's like more grass and stuff in here, whereas this is like obviously very muddy and gross, and this is the terrain here that's going to slow you down a lot. And then outside of that, the green terrain like this is not really going to do a whole lot. And you move over here in this sort of like darker green, you can see the contrast. It's not necessarily super noticeable, but this is definitely darker. This is the scrub terrain. You're going to see a lot of this on maps, and there are units that do get bonuses in this. I will be adding that to their UI as well. One of the things you can expect in the new patch is a lot more transparency in terms of like unit cards and stats and so forth. So when you look at things in the army creation screen, you'll be able to see like much more what they're capable of. Most terrain types have like, you know, bonus in deserts, blah blah blah, but for whatever reason, scrub does not. So that's something that I'll be adding to the unit card so that you know for sure how you can deploy those units and deploy them effectively. Yeah, and then over here you're gonna see the deep kind of forest terrain. I kind of zoom down to the bottom to get a good look at it. But you can see the contrast between it and the rest of the grass. And this is the kind of terrain that you can hide in. Trees are immaterial in that regard. Like, you can put trees everywhere and not be able to hide a single unit on the map. It's all down to the terrain. And the forest terrain also has certain penalties that you can apply to units that fight inside it. And that's another one of the ways that I think we're going to make light infantry a little bit more interesting. I mean, we've already done this, but I want to say this out loud because I don't think a lot of people realize just how important it can be, because it tells you bonuses for sure, but also doesn't tell you penalties. So polearms, halberds, that sort of thing, when they fight in this kind of terrain, they do take penalties. Lancer, Cav in particular, the Roqueni Magloro, and the Throng Sheik Wolfborn, they're going to take penalties in here, whereas other cavalry units, such as Wood Elf Cavalry, don't take any combat penalties in the woods, or the Vorback Gadgetar have some pretty serious bonuses in here, I think to the tune of about +6. Be interested to see on how it looks on lower graphics. That's a really good point, actually. I can show that a little bit later, but I think it's more or less the same. The textures are not like super high quality, so I don't think that they impact the like graphics too much. From what I remember, they don't really change all that much, but again, that's something we can explore a little bit later. Is there a way to make units still hidden in the trees while moving? There is no way to do that. It's just not something that you have on Medieval 2. You don't even have it, I think, in Napoleon. You know, as far forward as Napoleon. Then if we move over here into the center of the map, again, you can see the difference. So I'm going to leave the grass in here so that you can have that contrast, so you know kind of where the scrub terrain begins and where it ends. So grass, no combat penalties. Dirt, I think you're a little bit slower in dirt, but it's like nothing significant. I think it's like 90 to 95% speed. Then you get into scrub, which I think slows you down by about 25, and that's where you kind of get into the realm of penalties and things like that. So it is important to note that. Sand, snow, scrub, and forest are the 4 terrain types that actually have some sort of like penalty or like combat bonus that you can apply to them, but most of them will modify speed in some way or the other. So if you see your units being extra slow, it's probably because you're moving through a terrain that doesn't work out very well for them. And then you're going to have lots of forested areas over here. Ambushes and stuff abounds. A little bit of scrub there, you can see the difference. Yeah. One of the other things that I want to talk to you about that'll be coming in the new patch. Let's see if we have a few people in here. Yeah, so one of the other things that will be coming in the patch will be a vegetation fade. So you don't get this big old green mess all up in your face. and you have to like zoom in really low and like play with your camera in order to be able to figure out what the hell is going on. The creator of the Igni Feroque mod, Alex, has told me how you can create a sort of vegetation fade that mimics the fade that exists in later Total War games. So Warhammer, for example, is a really good game to put forward that like will remove vegetation. Either have a fade or you can turn it off entirely. And while we can't have a toggleable sort of option where you can just turn it off, what we can do is play with the textures for the vegetation and like the alpha channels and their MIP maps and whatever. And we can create a sort of fade. So when you're far away like this, you'll be able to see the trees and things like that. But then when you get up close and personal with them, once we've implemented this, you won't see the leaves. You will see the individual tree trunks, so you know kind of like where things are, and you can help orient yourself and orient your troops. But the vegetation will not be a problem for getting in your face anymore, which is a really good change, I think. All right, so we added a decent amount of mud, I think, going through here. Again, I want to try and like blend that into the terrain so that we don't have these big patches of green. Like, you have to kind of be careful about how you do it because it will remove terrain if you're not careful. That looks a little bit better, I think. This is an area that that I want to sort of like be a little bit gross. There we go. We'll extend the terrain kind of out here a little bit like that. Make it look just kind of messy. There we go. And eliminate some of that green. Bring the arms a little bit closer to the center, but have them still be kind of uneven, so this one juts out a bit more. I think that looks nice. There we go. Not so square-like. So I think that'll do for that side of the map. Moving through there will obviously be a risk-reward kind of thing, because you can, you know, protect your flanks, and a lot of these, like these buildings here, they have collision. You can't pass through them except for the areas that are obviously open like that. Over here, you can kind of hide units behind this hill and behind this tower, and defend yourself from any units that may be up here on the hill and stuff like that. But there will be some speed problems as you move through the muddier areas, which I think is a nice trade-off, because then you're going to get the hill, you're going to get the defensible position, but there will be some sort of counterplay just built into the terrain tiles that you're sitting on. So I think that's nice. Try and connect this a little bit. Remove some of that green. Oops. It's not that important. Little click there. Yeah, I love the vegetation fade in later games. I want to do some forest fighting, but I hate having to zoom in to see what's happening. Yeah, it's a really big problem. And we have some beautiful vegetation that we imported from Europa Barbarorum 2. And I want to make more use of it, and I want to have those like really tight kind of claustrophobic forest battles, but you can't really do that when you have vegetation all up in your grill. So yeah, we'll be adding the vegetation fade, and that will eliminate like leaves and stuff when you're up close and when you're looking at like trees and stuff when you're like up like this, and then it'll start to disappear, which I think is important. There's been a lot of like effort expended to try and like remove a lot of the trees, and like now we don't even have to worry about that. So yeah, it's a big deal. There we go. This and kind of like have it like run parallel. I'll integrate that into the mud that's right there. And I'll bring out a bit more of the mud as well that we laid down earlier. Yeah, I think that looks good. That's a nice little area here. I do want to try and eliminate some of these, lighter areas like that, because I think they stand out a little bit too much. Yeah, just like that. It's okay to have some of them, but, you know, not too many. That'll do. Yeah, good. A little random patch green over here. Can get rid of that because it like sort of borders and like shows off where you like place the terrain tile. Yeah, you don't want it to look like like you've gone over it in an editor. Okay, so I think the next area, because when I'm thinking about the like maps and stuff like this, usually players tend to like gravitate towards the center unless there's somebody on the other side who's kind of like playing the kite game, you know what I mean? Or like trying to avoid. And in team battles, I don't find that happens as often because people are more willing to just like stand and fight. It's harder to coordinate, you know, 3 people with like a constant like fluid moving army. And so since I'm building this map kind of with team battles in mind, and specifically with like competitive like tournament games, yeah, we're gonna focus a lot of the attention kind of like in the center area here. I'll just have like a little kind of patch of mud here. We'll just outline it and then we'll like press on the brush a bit harder. Make sure it like kind of extends more or less equally on the both sides, so like one side's not spending more time in the mud than the other. Just run in like circles on like a low sort of pressure. And then we'll go over the edges with like dirt. Kind of helps like accentuate the mud area, let you know where it is a bit better by putting something next to it that contrasts pretty obviously. And that's kind of going to be the name of the game, I think, a lot here. I mean, I've said this already, but I will reiterate it. It's that I want people to be able to, like, judge things as a glance, because I do want Silmarillion to be, like, an actual proper, like, competitive mod and, like, have, like, you know, a strong competitive scene that, like, people kind of don't feel is too opaque and, like, don't feel cheated by things like terrain. So it is obviously a concern, but I'm also not a big fan of, like, flat maps and stuff. So it's a fine balance to strike. Oops, that's probably too much in the center there. Yeah, that's better. Get rid of some of that, like, oops, obviously, like, white terrain. Don't want that. Let's see if we have any questions so far. I'm open to just about any questions you guys have, be it about Paladin or Gondolin, or about any of the stuff that I've said so far, or if you've actually missed things. I will reiterate a little bit. One of the things that we're looking at doing in Silmarillion Total War is changing the way that a lot of like hand-thrown skirmishers work. I watch a lot of competitive Warhammer, and as I just mentioned, that I want Silmarillion to sort of have that, like a similarly, like, obviously it's going to be niche. It's not going to have like mass appeal, but I do want it to have like a healthy competitive scene. And so I've been looking at the way that like things are done in other games and other, like, not just Total War, but like a lot of Total War, and how that sort of stuff gets done. And one of the things that I actually really liked, I think that's a little bit too much there. But one of the things that I really liked is the way that the Marauder Javelins from Chaos work. Now, when I played that myself, I was like, wow, it's really coming from Medieval 2, where Javelins obviously hit like trucks like right off the get-go. I was like, wow, this is awful. These things don't even work. Like, I throw like 30 Javelins at something and like it doesn't die. But I was looking at it, and I was looking at sort of the niche that those things fulfilled, especially moving into like the later games of like tough competitive matches where, you know, your missile units really do start to count, and your ability to chip away at HP really is important, especially that of big monsters. I started to look at that, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And I was looking at ways we could add that into Silmarillion. So this is kind of what I've come up with so far. It's entirely possible that it changes a lot before release, but I think it's a solid idea, and it's definitely worth like trying to explore a little bit. There we go. Oops. Try and like surround this here with a little bit of extra mud just so it extends a bit farther into the other side, because it does go pretty far over this way. We'll do it in a way that like actually makes sense, I guess, with the terrain that surrounds this. Oh, am I on dirt? I am on dirt. That's my bad. It's okay, now we have a nice like outline. There we go. Trying to eliminate some of that like sand, because it just doesn't look right with everything else that we put next to it. There we go. That'll do. And now this like whole area can be kind of problematic to move through cavalry and things like that. Now I'm not going to do that on the other side, because I don't want to just like, I don't want to funnel everybody into the middle, right? And if we put mud everywhere but in the center, obviously that's where people are going to gravitate to with their mobility, and it just kind of limit their choices. But I think having it over here, especially where all the other mud terrain is, it just kind of like makes sense. This area is like sort of ruined anyway, so like thematically and like gameplay wise, that is something I think that'll work. I do enjoy Turin's tournament streams. I really enjoy Turin, and I really enjoy Indie Pride and stuff like that. So I have been watching a lot of their stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. There's a lot of decision making that I didn't even realize went into this, and I wanted to add that into Silmarillion in whatever form that I can that's like mechanically acceptable and like, you know, congruent with the overall goals of the project. Pardon me, I just need a drink. Because that's what I want to encourage, right? I want to like have all those little kind of tiny choices that you like put into your deployment, put into your composition, and then end up eventually how you use it on the field to be like important, and to be something that more importantly you can clearly identify and talk about. Because it's like, why are you gonna play something if it's not like satisfying? Like at the end of the day, if there's no difference between you and somebody who started on Tuesday when you've been playing for like a year, how good of a competitive game is that? And yeah, so that's kind of the conclusion I came to, and that's why we're here doing what we're doing with skirmishers and stuff like that, and with map design as well. So we have a few people who have just joined us, so I will reiterate what I've gone over so far. What we're doing right now and why we're in the battle editor screen in particular is that the new overhaul coming to our skirmishers is going to make mobility and sort of long-term like skirmish fire, focus fire, harassment, and that kind of thing more of a predominant force in certain maps on Silmarillion Total War. I think there's a lot of interesting choices to be made there. I think it opens up a lot of cool ass comps, and so that's what we're doing with the units. But that also needs to be reflected in maps, right? So you can have all the mobility in the world, but if you can't actually like stop and fire because there's like no reprieve for you because rush armies are breathing down your throat, then that obviously is a hole in that design philosophy. So I'm trying to fill that gap by adding some mud terrain to our newer maps. About 5 or so of them will get them, not to all of them, but there will be certain maps where like these sort of compositions, harassment compositions, are important. And I'm also explaining a little bit about how that all works. There's a lot of like misconceptions, and there's like holes in the way that the game presents like terrain bonuses and things like that, and a lot of people don't pay attention to them. So I want you to pay attention to them, because I want you to be prepared when you go in to your competitive games. So I think this map is looking kind of good the way it is. We'll do a quick little overview here. And that there's lots of like foresty area here. There's a few ambushes, a few copse of trees where you can launch sudden attacks from either side. And then of course there's this little strip here as well. And the lines tend to be about here and here. So both sides will be able to take advantage of a whole bunch of hidden terrain on this particular side of the map. And that'll be sort of the name of the game over here. Whereas on the other side, there are some things that limit your mobility a little bit. But there is some worthwhile terrain, a lot of elevation over here that is worth fighting over. So those are some of the choices that you'll have to consider, along with your composition and your place on the map, and like where you fit into your team's composition and dynamic and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool. Adds a lot of depth, a lot of nuance. let's move on to the next map. I think the other one I wanted was Silmarillion. This is one of our FFA maps. Hey Calvin, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us. Alright, let's take a good look at this here. So look at what I've done so far. Like over here, this is looking like a lot of like scrub terrain, places that will kind of slow you down. There's a little bit of like dirt and stuff, but I think what we might do is there's many patches of dirt here. We'll probably swap those a little bit with like swamp terrain and things like that, so that you can fight around them. Silmarillion is, or rather was, designed as a free-for-all map, and so having these little like pockets where you can kind of get stuck on with your heavy infantry, with your cavalry, and things like that. I think that'll encourage a pretty like interesting dynamic of positional play here when it comes to like free-for-alls, especially 4-player free-for-alls, because everyone's going to start with a little bit of the same thing. So let's go ahead and let's do that. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions about kind of what we're doing, why we're doing it, by all means ask them. I'm one of the lead devs, so like I can probably answer most of your questions. Even campaign stuff, although I don't really want to talk about campaign today. This is more of a multiplayer related thing, but I'm just gonna slowly get it in there, and I don't want to like just make square blobs because it doesn't look good, right? Like at the end of the day, you don't want to play on maps that are ugly. But at the same time, these sort of things need to like actually be, you need to think about where you put them, because I've made mistakes where I put too much mud on maps before. If you guys are familiar with Reforged, I actually made the Ruins of Dol Guldur map, and I put mud everywhere except for like certain areas, like the higher ground doesn't have any mud, and the end result of that is that it's a cool idea, but in practice, like most people don't fight on those hills, and then everyone's moving around at like shit speed. So yeah, something to think about. But I think it's fairly acceptable where we have where we're placing the mud today, because there's lots of open area around it. There's like hills and stuff, and there's lots of like ways that you can avoid the mud and use your mobility and use your light infantry and stuff like that. I also want to try and make it look natural, so I want to avoid like, see how it's like kind of like square and like obviously bridge-like? I want to avoid that if I can. Yeah, do something like this. Oops, that looks better. I'll kind of like feather it on the edges here as well. We can always go over it with some other terrain too and blend it in a little bit nicer, so that's not the end of the world if it's kind of blocky right now. I think that looks pretty decent. We could go over it with no, not mud. No, we just want regular dirt. Yeah, dirt tends to pair pretty nicely with it. It's like nice to make it just not. Yeah, you want to avoid those hard lines, right? River crossings, yes. Probably won't have too many river crossings, although I'm open to suggestions, because I do want to make river crossings like competitive. A lot of people avoid them because you don't want to just get funneled into like one shitty choke point and then die. And then nobody wanting to do that means everyone sits on the other side of the river and skirmishes until somebody with who brought more archers is the one who gets to sit back, and then the other person has to come to them. That's not fun, and it takes forever. And yeah, there's there's so many reasons why I wouldn't want to do that. Like from pacing to the lack of like interesting choices, like tactical gameplay, it's just not cool. So I'm looking for ways to make river maps interesting. So if you have any suggestions, or anybody you know has any suggestions, please hit me, because all this like overhaul and the way that it all kind of plays together, it all started with a map that someone else made. So all right, add a bit of mud there. We won't add a ton here, but we will add like a little patch of it over in this area. I want to like keep a nice gap between these two so that they're not too close together, because again, you get that sort of like funneling, right? Which can be good sometimes, but in this case, that's what I want to avoid. There we go, nice little patch there. Even blends quite seamlessly into the terrain around it, so that's good. Can't stay online. Hope you have a great New Year's Eve and a fantastic 21. Thank you so much, Calvin. I hope that your New Year's is just excellent as well. I hope it's safe, and I hope it's filled with a lot of busy days for you. So you take care, man. Thanks for dropping by. All right. Kind of build into that a little bit. And again, the purpose of doing that is not just so it looks nice. There are some pretty important gameplay implications for the terrain that you place into your maps, and therefore there are decisions that have to be made about what you do and why. So that's something to bear in mind if you guys ever get into like map making in Medieval 2. It's actually really simple. Like the map editor itself is like really easy to understand. It's not like complicated in the slightest. It's just like sort of built into the game, and I can tell you how to activate it, and yeah, it's pretty easy. I want to connect them a little bit. Leave like a slight, like very, very small gap in there. Okay. Engorge this particular part. God, I love the word engorge. It's just filthy. There we go. I don't like that. There's a lot of like hard lines in there. I think that's kind of okay though. That's not bad. Get rid of this one here though. Good enough. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's kind of more over on this side, so we'll probably add some, maybe these sections over here and then over here, because again, this is a free-for-all map, so we gotta bear that in mind. I want everybody to kind of start with a patch of mud. I don't want one side to be like overly privileged over another, because then you get into bad news bears territory. Don't want to like build like imbalances into your map just by being careless. Like you can do it, but you should probably do it deliberately instead of just like, oops, that was an oversight. Yeah, this one will be, it's not a lot around here, then there's like big gaps, so I don't mind making this one a little bit chunkier than some of the other ones we've done. Okay, that actually doesn't look too bad. It's like a little Cyclops smiley face. There you go. Happy 2021, everybody. This is all scrub terrain. There's good reasons to want to go through here. There's hills and stuff, so I don't think it needs mud. I could add a little bit. I don't know. We'll think about it. But for now. There we go. I'm trying to eliminate some of that like brings out like sand for some reason. There's like when you're screwing around with textures in this, it will go through, some of them will go through like a gradient of like, doesn't matter what you put it on. This is like the basic terrain. You're gonna get that like sand. See how it like goes dark, then it goes light. It's like weird that way. that's something to, like, don't be like off put by it. You just gotta apply more pressure to it, and then it starts to work fine. I think that looks good. I think that's okay. Now if we kind of look at this, what's the space between them? There's a decent amount of space there. I don't necessarily want to add, we'll put it like sort of on the margin over here, like a little bit, so that it like transitions from the dirt into the mud. And it slows it down, but we like maximize the distance between the two. I think that's good. There's a big open area over here. I think that's fine. And there's the hilltop there. Do I want to do anything with that hilltop? I don't know if anyone has any insights on like how we can make this hilltop a little bit more interesting. I will say that if you're doing this as like a 1v1, the border cuts off probably right about here, so it's not like necessarily even for both sides, which is why this is not designed for 1v1. But on FFA, people just kind of start with like pie slices in different areas. Like some of those slices will be closer to here, some of them won't be, but I don't know. Is there anything you think it could be done with this? I'm certainly open to suggestions. Jordan, if you meet him, I assume you mean if I want you to make certain maps. Yeah, yeah. I can think about that and let you know. For the time being, I'm just gonna go over stuff that already exists, and yeah, I think that's the perfect amount of mud. If we put any more, we'd be overdoing it, and that's not what we want to do. So that's gonna be the Tomb Halad map. We'll go ahead and we'll save that again for a second time because I'm constantly afraid that I'll lose progress. So, oops, that's not what I want. Back to the battle editor. We'll continue down our list here. Hills of Hithlum. I think this one just needs like trees and stuff removed from it, so nothing too exciting there. But it will give me an opportunity to do sort of a mindless task that I can then... Oh, got some mud here. Perfect. So the Hills of Hithlum already has this kind of built into it. I don't know who made this. Probably Steward. Looks like a map that Steward would make. But it will give me a mindless task to do while I reiterate some of the new sort of design ideas that we're going to try and bring to Silmarillion Total War. But first, let's get our vegetation tool set up. It's foggy too, so let's fix that. Don't want fog. I want clear, please. There we go. Yeah, that's a lot of trees. And the problem you'll run into this is not only we have performance issues and be more likely to crash, but also when you get close to them, like the game has trouble rendering all the trees. So like, yeah, I see how they disappear like that. It's just weird and it's just not a good thing. So try to avoid it and put less trees. Yeah, I think this in here would be like a nice area. When you switch the weather, sometimes it will like do weird things, like lighten the tiles that you touch with any tool. But in this case, it's kind of nice because it actually like helps me keep track of where I am, like what I've gone over. So that's pretty cool. A bug you can turn to your advantage. I can get a bit closer and we can be sure that we've like opened up that area. That's good. And a lot of these like really big trees, yeah, those are what we want to get rid of because they look fine from here. That's something to like bear in mind if you try to do maps in Silmarillion, because we use that like, what's going on here? Yeah, because we use the new Europa Barbarorum vegetation, is that they're much larger than the regular vanilla Medieval 2 trees, and so they will obstruct your view in like a really serious way. Now, it won't be a big deal once we get the vegetation fade in, but for the time being, you know, just be aware of that, especially like at a distance. It can really screw with your field of view. So, yeah, think about that. Another thing to note is that sometimes vegetation like this will stack on top of each other, and like there will be a value on the tile that you're working with for the for a different kind of vegetation than what you're working with. So when you're like removing stuff, you'll see that like sometimes other trees pop up. That's just because there's another value on that tile for the vegetation that was placed by whoever, and so you have to run like 2 tools over it. That's why I'm switching back and forth between the two. Ooh, yeah, this is pretty large enough. I think we might be able to get away with like using a larger tool or a larger brush on like a higher setting, and then just like lightly tapping, which will remove stuff. Most of what I want to remove though is these shrub things, because they kind of get in the way and like just don't need to be there. So I think we could probably like actually run over most of the map. Make sure you save often too. The map editor likes to crash. For whatever reason, it doesn't crash as much now that we've switched away from the vanilla vegetation, which makes me think that there's something wrong with the vegetation. But, you know, it will still do it occasionally. So make sure you save, otherwise you can lose a lot of progress. I know people who've lost like hours of progress because they forgot to just hit Control S real fast. It's not worth it, so. Right, so mindless task that I was going to talk about other stuff. Well, I was in the process of working with it. So for those of you new people who haven't been here for the entirety of the stream, what we're going to be doing in Silmarillion Total War is to try and bring some new skirmisher dynamics to the game. And this is mostly based on a lot of things I've observed, like watching competitive Warhammer games and even some Rome 2 every now and again. But there's a lot of units like, say, the Marauder Javelinmen, who don't do a lot of damage up front, but they do a lot of chip damage over time. And so that's basically the idea behind a lot of the mid-range skirmishers. We're adding a new Javelin unit called a harassment skirmisher, and I will go over the nitty-gritty details of that in a later video. So we'll be picking up again with my instructional video series for getting into Silmarillion. But yeah, that's basically the dynamic, and that's kind of the long and short of it. But in addition to that, we're also playing with the speed of light infantry. And the harassment javelins will have a little bbit of extra range, I think, over what you're probably used to in Javelins and Silmarillion Total War thus far. So they're good for like moving forward quickly, popping off a jab volley or two on slower, heavy infantrymen, and then retreating or going after like lightly armored targets. Like if they want to toss all the jabs into like lightly armored targets or targets without a shield, then they can do a lot of damage to them as well. So it does kind of help carve out a nice little niche for our light infantry units, which are kind of just there, and they live or die mostly by, you know, things like having a lot of melee defense or having armor piercing and stuff like that. And not a lot of attention is paid to the terrain bonuses and like their speed. Like that's not why you're bringing them. You don't even look at that stat most of the time. You're gonna be looking at like defense and attack and stuff like that. So I want to, certainly for the veteran players and for new people who start to kind of get more comfortable with like the meta and how the mod works, I want that to be there for them so that like they can make some cool choices, especially when they know the maps, and then have those be meaningful. So that if there's somebody who's like coming in who's new and isn't actually like bearing in mind these kinds of considerations, then they're gonna have an advantage, because I think that's an important part of having like a nice competitive game and nice competitive mod, is bearing things like that in mind. I managed to clean it up a fair bit. A lot of those like shrubs and stuff. Yeah, and you can sort of see a bit better like where whoever made this map in the first place kind of wanted their trees to be, and the shrubs have kind of like just moved in and been annoying. So now we're getting rid of some of that. And it also makes the terrain underneath much more visible, which is important, right? There's a lot of mud here, a lot of like scrub and like different kinds of things that all have. Some of them you can apply combat bonuses or penalties to, and some of them have speed bonuses or speed debuffs to them. So yeah, you need to be able to see those in order to make good choices, and you can't really do that when it's all obscured by canopy. Let's see if we have any more questions here. We have 9 people. That's pretty decent. Have fun. I'm going to work. Good luck, Captain Gervais. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, please do chime in. Obviously, I like talking about this stuff, which is why we're doing a stream that's basically just dedicated to talking, so don't feel shy. Those are shrub. Let's get rid of those. There we go. That opens up the play area a lot more. You can see the terrain better, you can see the elevation, and that's all really, really important, I think. And I know that that's important when you're playing in a mod that works the way that ours does. So let's make that a bit bigger. Put up a path here, or on the side of like more area visible. And because we don't have the vegetation fade in yet, we're also going to go over the forest areas. Make sure that we save. Trying to even those out a little bit so that you can see through the canopy more, because these trees, as I said, are very tall and it's easy to get lost in them. But more gaps means, you know, more stuff you can see. But at the same time, you also do want to, if you can, leave like a little bit of heavier trees in certain areas. We had someone ask earlier if it was possible to implement some sort of change so that when units are moving, like hidden units are moving in like forest or whatever, then they can remain hidden. And while we can't actually do that, there is sort of a workaround to it. And like from a distance, especially if people don't have banners of it like activated, then you can put units in heavy tree and like move them either like very, very quickly and like rush out of the tree and hope people don't see them, or you move them a little bit, let them hide, move them a little bit, let them hide, and just sort of inch towards wherever it is that you're trying to get. That's a couple ways that you can sort of simulate that, but we can't like do it directly, unfortunately. It's a shame. I wish we could, but unfortunately we cannot. Go and get some of those shrubs there that just popped up. There we are. And even like you can remove them from the areas outside as well. I think that's what we're gonna do here. Remove as much shrub as possible from the areas outside the playing map, because again, that's all that stuff has an effect on performance, because like you're trying to render it while you're in game, and it can like make some of your trees have that weird visual glitch where they disappear. And that, as far as I can tell, uniquely happens only when there's too much vegetation on the map. Yeah, so we'll clear out the areas outside here too. Make sure we save as we go along. Again, you don't want to lose progress. It's a waste of your time. So just save early and often. Just a quick Control S. We'll give you a little pop-up about a sanity report. Obviously, the original developers have been able to understood just how irritating it can be when this thing crashes on them, so they probably understood the instability pretty well, hence sanity report. Orc fodder, OP, please nerf. Orc fodder, OP, please nerf. We don't have an orc fodder unit? I'm not too sure what you mean there, man. All right. And that looks way better. That's like way more like playable. You can see the elevation, you can see the terrain types, and you can bear those kind of considerations in mind when you're playing. So, Hills of Hilltop, there we go. Let's get out of there. Move on to the next map. Hills of Hilltop, Ruins of Dorloman. This is actually a map that I made for Conquest a million years ago. And it's interesting, and it is kind of congruent with the way that we're taking the direction of light infantry and like medium infantry and skirmishers and things like that. So yeah, I wanted to include it, but it does need to be touched up a little. Yeah, that one took forever to load. Oh, and it's all misty and stuff too. Like, it's a cool map. I took a lot of time like putting it together. And there's a ton of like hidden areas, and like most of this map is like something you can hide in, which is an interesting thing to do. But it definitely does need to have some trees and stuff removed. So let's go ahead and do that. I think the first one we need to do is, don't want dark dry, I want clear. Let's see what the hell we're doing. Perfect. And most of these are trees, but again, we're gonna get a whole bunch of like scrub and stuff that kind of shows up. Now, these areas are weird. Like depending on the graphic settings you have, on like lower settings, you'll actually see water in there. But there's some weird bugs with the battle editor, and that's one of them. Yeah, we'll take most of these out for the sake of player's sanity. We'll also add a little bit back in too, just so it looks like a forest. Adds that immersion. It's not just one big like terrain tile. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, I want to add this because this is a barbarian village. Yeah, there we go. Get rid of a lot of this crap here too. Make that a bit smaller. This one's probably gonna take a while. So many damn trees on here. I don't know what I was thinking. Get some shrub here. Oh my god, update. Yes, we're talking about the update, some of the newer stuff here. So I assume that you just arrived, so I'll kind of fill you in on what we've been doing and talking about so far. The long and short of it is that I'm looking at ways to make skirmishers in multiplayer more exciting and more dynamic. Dynamic, that's the word I wanted. I tried 2 words at the same time, didn't work out for me. Do not recommend. But to that end, I will be adding some new types of skirmishers, changing the way that our current units like Javelins and things like that work. And all of that is going to be also reflected further in our map design and terrain tiles, and more importantly, speed. A lot of terrain affects speed, and a lot of lighter units are being made a lot faster in the upcoming patch. So it's going to change the sort of tactics that you can use, how you use certain units like heavy infantry, especially through difficult terrain areas, and just overall, I think, make the game a little bit more interesting and add a whole bunch of depth to it. In addition to the harassment javelin, so like low ammo, or like low damage, high ammo, and decent range javelin skirmishers, the current javelin units, most of them will be made into sort of hard target javelins. So they'll be good for monster hunting, they'll be good for like dealing with bodyguards and other like really heavily armored targets that the harassment javelins just really can't do efficient damage against. So that'll add some interesting sort of play when it comes to our javelin skirmishers in particular. Lots of diversity there because there's going to be light, medium, and they're all going to have their own kind of like terrain bonuses and like speed values and things like that. And they'll also have targets that they're most efficient against. So it's going to reward you for knowing the maps and for knowing the units that you're playing with as well, which I think is it's a good thing. You can't really go wrong with that, can you? Yeah, look at that. We're like uncovering buildings that have been hidden by this extremely thick canopy of trees. Since you're here, Mr. Glove, a few other things to note in the update is that we will be playing with a vegetation fade, sort of similar to what the more modern Total Wars have. So the closer you get to trees, the less of the vegetation that you'll see. The trunks will remain, so that you can sort of orient yourself and like, you know where the actual trees are. They don't just like disappear entirely because that just looks like a visual bug. But the vegetation will disappear, and that will allow you to see through a lot of these like heavily kind of forested areas, which will go hand in hand with exactly what I'm doing right now. So removing a lot of the trees, making it a little bit easier to see things. Add some of them back occasionally. But that will also be built into the way that the mod works, which is really, really cool. We got the idea from the Igni Feroque team, and they've already successfully implemented this so that I know that it can be done, and their team lead was gracious enough to allow me the secret, as it were, of how to do it. It's actually pretty obvious and not actually a secret at all. But yeah, it's a really good idea, and I'm excited to bring it to Silmarillion. There we go. Really open that up in a pretty big way. Get rid of some more here. A little bit more there as well. Open up a playable area. Yeah, just looks good. Here's some of the shrub as well, so this area is kind of like open. I really like this. I really like this little like pocket. Yeah, the intention with the map when I had made this sort of like show you a land that is like past its prime. So there's like obviously villages that used to exist here that have like sunk into the mud. They've been like burned out. There's now like military camps and stuff on either side. Obviously battles have taken place here. Let's try and get rid of some shrub too. Where's some of this forest on this side? And this area I want to be a little bit more hidden. So it's like an obscure sort of bandit area. There we go. That's way better. Way more playable. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of the shrub in the town as well. This will probably come back because there's like this weird bug with vanilla assets where they just place shrub that you've never asked them to. Yeah, that's way better. Very nice. Save it one last time because I'm paranoid about that kind of shit. Move on here. Hello, thank you for this mod. I can't wait to play Medieval 2 again to test. Sorry for my English. Don't worry about it, man. Your English is great. And you're welcome. I appreciate you dropping by to say so. Alright. Let's see. That was Ruins of Dorloman. We'll go to Dorcaranthier. This one I don't think is too bad. This is one of the early maps that I made. It's going to incorporate a lot of like elevation and stuff. This one's actually not too bad. There's some sort of thicker areas of tree that I think we should get rid of just for, because as I've mentioned a few times now, the new trees that we use, that we imported from Europa Barbarorum, are beautiful and they're well optimized. Like they don't affect your frame rate at all, but like, goddamn if they don't obscure your vision in a really big way. They're about like 2 to 3 times as tall as the vanilla trees, which is something I did not realize when I first brought them in. And this battle is actually kind of cool. I really enjoy history. It's something that once upon a time I considered doing like a degree and like trying to like pursue a career in. Obviously, I haven't done that. But this map is based on the Battle of Bannockburn. During the, I think it was the first Scottish War for Independence. Could be wrong. But yeah, it was fought by Robert the Bruce, defeated the English. This is sort of to represent the English camp. And this is like sort of the hillock and like the forested area that he hid many of his skill trumps in. Some of that. That's like mud and stuff out here, and that's gonna like slow units that come into it, make a battle over here just a big ugly slog. It will open up the opportunity for harassment with ranged units and stuff like that. And the opposite team will start obviously in these little work camps and stuff. It's like a themed map. Dorcaranthier was there's a fortress of obviously Corinth here, one of the Sons of Feanor. And it's a pretty decent map. It just needs to have, I think, a little bit more forest removed from it, and then it'll start to see a little bit more play. I hope. Definitely put a lot of effort into this one. Happy New Year, Lebrox. You have a good one, man. Martin Latour. Happy New Year to you as well, Martin. Isn't it just clever modding of trees and sprites? Nah, it's actually really simple. Like, what you're gonna do is you're gonna go into like the mip maps basically, and like play with the transparency in the alpha channels for the textures for all of the vegetation, which is easy. It just is tedious and time consuming, and from what I understand from talking to the person who did this in the first place, it's best to have Photoshop to do it. And I personally don't have Photoshop, so I've hopefully tracked down a volunteer who will be willing to do that sort of thing for us. But yeah, that's how it's done. Like I said, it's not really a secret. It's actually pretty simple, but it's just a bit tedious. Remove some of the trees from the roads if we can. I think that'll look better. And we'll remove a little bit more of the shrub and stuff from like down in here. Don't want the trees on the road. Yeah, you'll see trees pop up now as we start to remove the tree and shrub value from things. But yeah, I think this is a cool map. It's pretty dynamic. There's lots of like, obviously there's sort of defensive areas here, and it's probably best played as a cityscape. But if you want to play it as a field battle, that's totally doable as well. There's like lots of places that you can fight over here. There's elevation, but there's also like counter elevation, so you can park an artillery piece here and bombard people who are hanging out on this hill up here. And if they don't have any sort of counter artillery, then it sucks to be them. You might be able to just drive them off the hill just through artillery fire, making it not worth it to be up there. So that's important. Move that a little bit, make it a bit more open. Yeah, remove some of that shrub, improve the performance of this map overall every time we do something like that. Is there a way to reduce the tree density from Reforged map that I ported into Silmarillion? Yes, there is. Doing it for vanilla assets, like the generic war camps and stuff, will probably take a little bit more like fine tuning. But it is possible. I found out a way to do it, and I applied that to a lot of the Silmarillion, map assets that we've ported from Battle for Middle-earth 2. And I've also applied that to our Halloween assets, which are currently available on ModDB, and will also be available in the upcoming patch. So there is a way to do it, and I've fixed it on a lot of things, but there are certain assets where it's going to take a little bit extra time just to make sure that it's done properly. So yes, it is possible. One of the other things you can do is like just run the shrub tool over things too, because sometimes there are trees there that look like trees but are classified as shrub in game files. That's just because the new Europa vegetation works that way. Their shrubs are like more like trees. But yeah, that's a couple of things. That's one thing that you can do right now, and then the other fixes I think will come a bit later. They might already be public. I don't think they're public in Fall of Feanor though, but they are available through our asset pack for Halloween, so you can download that from ModDB. That'll fix some of it as well. Yeah, I thought you were Spirit of Thunder. You did send me your Roman historical maps. And I haven't had a chance to like look at them and go over them, but I can definitely start to remove some of the trees on there. Like they'll start with the trees, but then you can actually remove them and like properly remove them such that they don't come back. So that's important. But there are a lot of vanilla assets still, like the watchtowers and other stuff that I can't just immediately apply the fix to, because you have to do, unless you want them to have like weird like pathfinding and some other issues, then they have to be done a little bit more carefully. Look at that. It's way nicer. Go some more there. Cool. It's a good map, if I say so myself. Alright, so there's Dorkaranthier. We'll move on to the next thing. And then this will probably be our last one. I think we've been streaming for long enough, and I've talked about most of the things that I want to talk about. Anyway, let's take a look at Hilltop Township. This is another map that I made originally for Reforged. I think this is the it's some Arnor themed map, but it also has a lot of trees on it. Yeah. Oh, this is a bug that happens sometimes when you like load through the editor from another map. You have to like exit and go back and Hilltop Township. Hopefully it works this time. Yeah, it's not perfect yet, but there is a way to do it. Now I know how to. Hello, Reese. Thanks for joining us, man. Oh, wow. Something terrible has happened to my map here, so I'll have to figure out a way to fix that, because I know that it works. Well, I'll come back to that one later when we're not on stream. Hilltop Township. We'll avoid that, and we'll go to Maglore's Gap. And we're going to do a little bit of different stuff on this. There's a few things that I want to like change, and that'll like talk a little bit more about like map design. So if there's anybody out there who's like interested in like level design and stuff, I'm by no means an expert. I'm not a professional or anything, but I am somebody who is like interested in game design as a potential career option in the future. So I mean, take it as you will. Take it, leave it. Let's see here. So when I saw people play on this map, I observed a game on this map. There is a path that goes up here, but I don't think this actually has proper pathfinding. Like, it's not low enough in the right areas to allow you through it, and it's also way too high. But what I noticed on this is that there's a lot of camping, which kind of sucks. And there's like very little. There's lots of open areas here, and it looks good. Like when you like take a look at like what it is, and it looks cool, but a lot of it doesn't end up getting like used. And I think a potential way to make this map like a bit more interesting than just everyone funnels into this gap and like people kind of like vanguard up on these hills here, because both teams have access to them, and then fight over those, and then it pushes everyone into that tiny little funnel here. I think what we need to do is like open up some extra paths through the mountains to allow people to like come out into some of these other areas that the map maker obviously like wanted people to look at and probably to play in, because you just can't get to them because there's just no room. So I think what we'll do is we'll cut a path through the mountains here, like a nice like wide one, and then we'll like kind of keep true to the idea he had here of this higher mountain pass, but I'll make it a little bit lower and a little bit more manageable. So that's what we're gonna do. Yeah, that's definitely a thing that like, and I did this when I first started, screwing around with maps and like getting interested in like how to design levels for multiplayer. It's like you have an idea in your head and you like go with what looks pretty, but then you sort of end up with like some flaws in it, like this, right? Where everyone funnels into one area and all the other like little things that you put down and like took care to place on the map, they just don't get used, because there's no way to actually use them because of what you ended up doing. So let's try and flatten this out. So we're going to take the height tool, and if you hold down, you can play with the power with like the two little, I don't know what they're called. It's like the comma and the period buttons. Period makes it stronger, comma makes it weaker. So we're going to take this tool and then set it to whatever strength we want. Hold down shift, and then you just run it over, right? If it's not going fast enough for you, then crank it up. Just be aware that it does get super fast. We'll start at the top here. Just like slowly try and like run it through here. And then even if we run into like water and stuff, we'll use the plateau tool to kind of smooth it out. So I said I wanted this to like be really, really large, like a nice like large path through the mountains. And I think it's gonna be important to do that anyway because we're right next to the red line. So there's like nowhere that they can move like laterally this way, but like over here, we can give them more options and like still kind of keep most of this mountain range intact. Make it a bit bigger, maybe. Don't want to spend all day on this. I do have New Year's plans. Oh shit. Cool. So we can even have it like come out in elevation over here, which I think is kind of neat. Or, like maybe we'll get rid of this part, but we'll keep the. Let's make sure we save that. We'll keep this plateau here, which is something that you can come down onto, and maybe we'll add something similar to the other side. Looks really ugly at the moment, but we will fix it eventually. There are ways. I try to keep the camera away from this because like when we move in here, because there's all the elevation, it'll like screw with things. So when you can, you can also make it like hard to judge depth, so you gotta be constantly moving around. Oops, that was wrong. Okay, now we've like excavated this massive trench. It's time to do something with it. This is where the plateau tool is really helpful. Just make sure that that's like large enough to actually be like worthwhile, because we don't just want to create another like bottleneck necessarily. And like once we get all the terrain down, then we can take a look at like maybe adding a little bit of like elevation points on either side so that people can like park artillery or like missile units up there and jockey for position without, you know, actually jockeying for position, you know. Oof, yeah. Okay, so we've like reached the bottom there basically. I'm not going to talk much. I don't understand, but I will follow the construction of the mod carefully. Thank you very much, Zebrox. There is going to be a little bit of, it's like an interview, I guess, that I did with Admiral Price. I don't know if you follow him as a YouTuber, but he's a really cool guy. I had a chance to sit down and talk with him about, you know, kind of how I want things to work with the mod and like campaign. That's another thing people ask a lot about. So once that comes out, it should be out tomorrow, I think, depending on whether or not he gets the things done that he needs to. But that'll be over on Admiral Price's channel. So if you guys want to learn a little bit more about the mod, about the philosophy behind it, there's a lot of stuff I don't go into like here on this stream that we do talk about. So yeah, I recommend you check it out. And you can also follow us on ModDB, all the sort of usual places. We have an Instagram because, you know, we're a bunch of cool Zoomers or whatever. Yeah. I appreciate the support, and I hope we live up to your expectations. We'll do our very best in any case. But let's go with the plateau tool here and try and make some sense out of this horrible mess. So what the plateau tool does is like when you hold it down, you like sample the height of the terrain, and then as you move it across there, this is a really good way to like make bridges. And as long as you don't move or like let go of your click, basically, it'll like instantly like flatten everything to the height that you set for it. So it's super useful that way. I don't necessarily want to make like a massive like gorge or nothing. And like I said, I want to open this up as much as I possibly can. So we're going to do that. Try and keep it nice and big so that people can play around with it. And then we have like some options here, right? So let's reduce this. Oops. I think that'll do. yeah, we'll flatten out on both sides, and then what we'll do is look at ways that we can like add elevation, maybe, to make this a little bit more interesting. Oops. Let's open it a bit more. Yeah, let's kind of like cut through there. We can do something about how like flat this looks here, because it doesn't really look natural. So we can add, go to heights. A good way to do it is like add a little bit here, like on the edges. That's probably a little bit too much, but you know what I mean? And it just looks sort of more mountainous. And not just like you carve this out with the power of God, which is essentially what we're doing. Make like little stalagmites, and don't necessarily make them like screw with the heights a little bit. Screw with like, you know, how far they come out. Like maybe we can put a ridge in between these two. Yeah, that way it doesn't look like standard. Can't remember where I heard it from. I think it might have been a Ridley Scott movie about God not building in straight lines, and yeah, that's kind of what I try to think about when I make maps. Pretty sure it was Prometheus. Wretched movie, but you know, liked the line. Kept that at least. There we go. Now let's put our camera here a little bit. I think yeah, I think that's a little bit better. And now like you can get through to these two different areas, because there's a little like work camp over here, and there's like this elevation that you can like try and fight for. And to, or like on that note, I guess, let's play with, put a little bit of elevation here, right? So we'll put a little like barrier here, and we'll plateau this a bit from its lowest point. Yeah, like right here. Nope, that's too much. Yeah, and then there's this little hill. It's like worth fighting over. But it's not so significant that it blocks off the entire area. And also, if you manage to take it, then it gives you a little bit of extra elevation that you can use on troops that are out here. Although it is quite like close to it, so there's like a trade-off there. But that's something you can potentially use against. Oops. Use against any defenders who might be trying to like bottle you up. I'll use the smooth tool here a little bit. Make it look a little bit less jagged. Let's see. Sort of concerns, like terrain concerns that they have here. So maybe what might be interesting is how this one is like, there's the elevation that's directly in front of you. Maybe, and that like gives you a nice like shot basically. But maybe we could screw with the elevation over here and like open up, like plateau this a bit more, so that this is like the defensive kind of area, because they don't have a big hill, it's all flat. But like this might be something worth defending if there's people trying to force the crossing. I think it would kind of balance out the like very large hill that they have over there. It's like having something a bit smaller, but like a bit better positioned. Something you can take advantage of by like placing lines of infantry and skirmishers and stuff like that right here. We don't want to make it like so massive that no one wants to come through here in any case. On that note, we might cut out some of that hill on the other side there. Like clip off like the end over here, and then maybe make this a bit flatter, so that like if you don't want to fight up the hill, maybe you could take like horse archers or something, or like cavalry, and like whoop, zip zoom all the way around the corner there, come in from behind, or like assist this sort of main choke point over here. But yeah, like totally changes the way, like even just that one point totally changes the way that this map works. Instead of just one choke point in the center and like these two little spurs here being the most important points, now you've got like at least 2 to 3 extra things that are worth fighting over that could potentially swing the fight in the center. Anyway, plateau tool. What's with that? Try to maintain that like a little bit of elevation there, but we also want to like smooth this out. There's a nice little. It's the smudge tool. It's particularly good at this. Yeah. And now this is, we're gonna use this heavily on the other side on the mountain pass that I spoke of earlier. And that way, that's pretty steep too, so you can like have like nice little like defenses and stuff up there. Run it down this way and try and play with that a bit. And this, we want to make this smoother. Yeah. And we'll fuck with the smooth tool a little bit. I'll bring it back down slightly. So smooth and smudge, like the smooth tool tends to flatten edges and also like decrease the height of things, whereas smudge, depending on how you run it, can increase the height or decrease the height, but also like play with the sort of curve of the hill in a way that the smooth tool doesn't really. Hello there, Glorfindel. What's being made today? Today we're just kind of talking about new unit types that'll be coming in the new patch, and some changes being made to light infantry, skirmishers, that kind of thing, and the way that that's going to be reflected overall in map design. So what I'm doing is going over the maps in order to make them congruent with the new like philosophy and the new like approach, I guess. Approach is probably better. Philosophy sounds better. The new approach to skirmishers that we're going to try out. Yeah, so that's basically what we're doing. It's just trying to like go over maps, and I also really am interested in map design and like game design in general. So it's a nice little forum for me to kind of talk about that stuff and like offer people tips on how they can get started with map making in Medieval 2 Total War and stuff like that. So that looks way cooler, I think. This is nicer. And we want to plateau this a little bit more because we don't want people to be able to come up here, and I find the best way to do it is just like make a flat edge, kind of like that. That'll do. And that's reasonable. And then the other side has that massive hill that's easier to defend, but this one is like positioned such that maybe we should lower this little spur here too, so that they get a better angle. But it's positioned such that you can put infantry in the front to pin, and some extra troops over here to help like complete the cordon, and then missile troops and artillery and stuff up here that'll be, you can make your enemies pay when coming across here. Oops, that was wrong. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, once they come into this area, you can sort of like set up here. And then maybe as well. Oops. Whoops. A minor kind of hill here. Smooth tool is nice for getting rid of those jagged peaks. There we go. A little minor hill. Ballistae in particular do very well when you put them on hills because there's bullet drop to the projectile, and that will always be the case. That's going to be the case with all artillery all the time. But the more that you elevate your artillery, the more likely you are to be able to like hit targets more accurately because the bullet drop is compensated for by the terrain. And they have a similar sort of dynamic over here. Smooth that out. There we go. It's not perfect. I don't like the way that this is like obviously very flat. It's a little weird, but I think it's okay. And so this side is basically done. So let's pop on over to the other end. And there's that little like mountain pass here that we want to play with. So this is where the smudge tool can be really useful. I think we also want to like mess with the height like a little bit, because like really high passes like this. Obviously, the person wants there to be a high pass, so we're gonna maintain that because that's sort of like their idea when they made this. But the really high passes are super exhausting for troops, and they just become impractical to use for that exact reason. So let's smooth a little bit if we can. Where's my smudge tool? There it is. Derp. There you go. It's not so jagged there. It's weird. I think I might have to plateau this little area a bit. Trying to make it a bit more suitable for things to actually walk across. I think that's better. And we can just smooth it out a little. Doesn't look so sort of blocky. There we go. Let's smooth this out too. I think this will actually work now. It's kind of hard to say unless you try it out a lot. Where's my smudge tool? Again, it's right there. Oops. Oops. Overshot it a little bit there. I'm not 100% sure that that's actually passable. So let's turn down the strength a little bit. Maybe like widen it. Might work. Smooth that out a bit. We can widen it. Oh man, that's still quite the sheer drop. I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that this is still practical, but play around with it. Happy New Year's to you too as well. You too as well. Happy New Year's, Glorfin. No, I hope it's good, man. I hope it's good. I hope it's safe. Smudge tool. I think that this will help. Yeah, lower that a bit. And we'll do the same up here. This should be pretty usable, but I feel like we need to like widen this too. Like it's one thing to have, you know, this be a little bit narrow, but like this area up here, you can barely put units through that. And some larger units than like artillery and stuff might have difficulties actually using that. So actually, because we have a height set already, I think the plateau tool might be a better option here. There you go. Yeah, now we can do something about this, because this obviously needs to... I'm not really good at doing like winding paths like this, but I might be able to do it by like kind of like making steps and then smoothing them out. Increase the height there a little bit, increase the width on the bottom here. Just like increase this a little bit more, make it turn a little bit, increase this a little bit more, but like not as much, so there's like almost sort of a gradient as you go up. And down here will be the least of it. And I think we might be able to turn that into something halfway decent if we screw around with plateau tool. Like establish. And this will be a bit higher up. And this could be a little bit higher in turn. This will be about the same size. This needs to come down though. And this needs to come down. And that needs to come down, and we'll save there. And that needs to, needs to come down a bit. That needs to come down a bit. Make that a bit steeper though, so we can like actually make it to this height that we want. Yeah, that's something. It's not perfect, but let's try smoothing it out a bit. Especially, you know, down here. Not too much. Start low. Like if you start low with the tool, it'll usually like stay lower, and I'll like increase the height, like what we just did there. Yeah, now they both kind of like have a trek to go up. It's not perfect yet, so this I think is where the smudge tool will be useful. Let's get rid of these. Don't need them here. Obscuring the view. And then the smudge tool is helpful for this, I think. Make it a bit larger. Yeah. Whoops. Oh, wow. I really screwed it up, didn't it? Smooth it out. Make sure that we start from like the lower parts here, so it'll bring this down. Oops. Increase the strength of the tool here so we don't have to play with it as much. Smudge tool again. There you go. It's a bit more useful. We do eat up a lot of the area up here that I wanted to have open in case people wanted to fight up here. But I don't expect you're going to see a lot of people come up this way. I think now maybe we could use the smooth tool a bit higher up this time. Try and like smooth this out a bit. Yeah, it's like quite the steep hill. But I think if you took some like light cavalry, you could get up this really quickly. And then maybe that's what this particular area will be useful for. So if it's like not defended, then there's opportunities for fast-moving units to come through here, but this isn't necessarily where you want to bring like a column of infantry or something, because we do have a better pass for that. So I think that's kind of nice. It's like 3 passes here, and they all do something, you know, slightly different. Like this is obviously very strategically important. Like you want to take this area and hold it, because it gives you these elevated positions, gives you control of the center of the map. And if you have that center control, then you can like split anybody on the wings in half, which prevents them from helping each other, presenting a united front. So that's useful for some fairly obvious reasons. This one is like nice and open, well suited for like infantry flanking and stuff like that. Large numbers of troops ferrying them from one side to the other, and then we have something a little bit more smaller, a little bit more niche on the other end that is still quite obscure and quite hidden. So if you like take a unit up there, it's very easy to miss that, especially if you're like playing at camera height in game and not looking at the mini map, and a lot of people don't. It's very easy to miss something coming down here until it's on the other side and it's already like gotten over there. And at that point it can just like rush down here. Yeah, get around this area. There would be nowhere for them to go. So what if we eroded some of this like sort of playable area here? Take the plateau tool. It's probably better, a quicker way to do this. We open up this like new avenue of attack for like things that manage to get around you. It's like this very like sneaky sort of winding path that like is really only particularly good for cavalry to try and use it. And that'll leave most of this, I think, intact. You can still use this area. That's kind of cool. Now let's take the smudge tool. Make it just a wee little smudge tool. Make this area passable, because we did sort of change the playable area down here. Pathfinding is important. Smooth will be useful down here too. Oops. If we actually look at this, yeah, you can get up here. I think we can do that without like eroding. Okay, that tent is now flying. That's obviously not perfect. Where's my plateau tool? Run that over there. There you go. That's not floating anymore. This area is usable. It is kind of campy. Like, obviously someone will want to hide up here, and like if you do that with 1 unit or like 2 or 3 units of high tier at the end of the game, then that's potentially a problem. But I don't want to screw with their map too much. It doesn't necessarily have to be like super balanced every time. People you play with, you can like talk to them and be like, hey, don't camp up there, you dickhole. And you know, sometimes people will do it. So we'll leave that. I don't want to screw with this map too much. Get rid of some of these trees here if we can. Yeah, it's like obscuring this like monastery here, and there's like all this like playable area. Trees don't need to be up there. We'll smooth out these paths here so that like this is something you can attack from like multiple sides, but you can still use the elevation to try and defend yourself. Oop. Gotta be a bit careful with how we do that. If we run it over existing like objects like that, then sometimes it makes them float. Don't want to do that with the rocks either, same problem. Cool. I think that's pretty good. Now let's just do some little finishing touches here. Get rid of some of the scrub on the road, because like, why would there be trees planted in the middle of your road? Obviously, if you're making a road, you'd probably cut those down. So let's get rid of them. Bring them as far back from the road as we can. A little weird thing here. Let's fix that. think this works now. I feel like we should remove some of this here. And this wee little path. Oops. Nope, don't want that. There we go. Just make that a little bit smoother as you come down so that we like can ensure that people can actually use this. Oh, that's pretty good. This is all playable. Yeah, this path looks like it works just fine. Comes into this tiny little area. I feel like we should plateau some of this. Because, like, it looks weird to me. There we go. We can flatten this too. So it's not just like a complete nightmare to have to go through as an attacker. I'll run smooth tool in this area. Make it a bit nicer. Oops, I don't want to do that. I do want to do this though. Bring this, make this hill a bit like more forgiving, if possible. Might need the smooth tool for that, like a little smooth tool. Or a big one. Let's do the big one. Get the more dramatic effect more quickly. Increase the width of that as well. There you go. Nothing's really, well, they're sort of floating. You can fix that easy enough. There we go. That looks fine. Especially at a distance, like if you get right down, you might see a little bit of float. There you go, that fixes that. But like most of the time you're not going to notice that. And most of the time you're probably not going to play up there anyway, so it's not that big a deal. Well, that'll do. I'll probably remove some of the trees out here, just to improve the performance on the map generally. But yeah, that's the patch so far. That's a lot of the stuff that we've added. That's a lot of the ways that we're like building maps into that sort of philosophy, I guess. Except for a Wood of 9. Hi-oh. Hello. Thanks for joining us. Got here a little bit late because we're about to finish, but in case of the high pass will be usable as medieval 2's pathfinding for large units is always a little bit weak in smaller, more confined areas. Yeah, I definitely recognize that, and that's why I tried to make this pass a little bit larger, but I think that getting up here with artillery will be no problem. Getting down, if you look at it'll probably be okay getting down too. But this area, maybe not necessarily suited for artillery. It would take a long time for artillery to get up here, and by the time you did, like, what's the game going to look like? Are you going to be in time to actually do anything important? And I think because of how rough the terrain is, I think this is a good place for like flanking cavalry, horse archers, that kind of thing. Fast ass light infantry maybe if you want to like take the fatigue hit, but I think something with mobility, cavalry, maybe even chariots, some elephant units, and then you can now come around this way and be super sneaky about it. I think that's a better use of that mountain pass. So they're sort of specialized, as I mentioned. Yeah. Rewatch, love the work, helps me improve mine. Thanks, man. I'm here to help, basically. I'm not like the best modder around, but I think I have a head for design. Like, I have some design sense, and yeah, I try to bring that as publicly forward as possible so that people can benefit from it. But yeah, not an expert by any means, but yeah, it's something I love to do. So I think we've greatly improved the Maglor's Gap map. There's that little pass over there, as I mentioned, and there's this massive one over here, and there's some terrain features that you can use on either side as an attacker or as a defender. Particularly right over here. It's kind of nice. But I will reiterate what we have gone over so far. For those of you who are just joining us, I will kind of sign it off with that. We will be playing with adding some new types of skirmishers to the game. Currently, Silmarillion is very much a infantry-focused meta. I want that to persist. That's one of the main and important goals of the project. Infantry is important. And I want them to be sort of the thing that wins most of your battles for you. Like, if you win the infantry fight, you know, you have a good chance at winning the overall game. That being said, there is room for skirmishers to take a more important role, and specifically light skirmishers, light infantry, to use their mobility and to use terrain types. So to that end, I've added a lot of mud and swamp terrain to some of our previous maps, and you guys saw me do that, and I talked about why I did that. So this stream will be uploaded. You can go ahead and watch that and get the nitty-gritty details. But the speed of infantry and the new role for like harassment skirmishers, longer range than your average javelin, not as nearly as much damage, about a 75% or so increase in damage for most units, or decrease rather, not increase, decrease in damage for most units, but a 50% increase in their ammunition. Will help you take advantage of slower units in terrain types to use that speed to its maximum potential, and also to open up some new compositions and to add a little bit of flexibility to our existing rosters. Right now, there's a lot of diversity for a lot of different factions. Some of them less so than others. The Philothrim currently are a little bit less flexible, but that will be changing with the new changes to light infantry and the new skirmishers, etc., being added. But that can always be improved, right? So now it is entirely possible to make a viable build with the Philothrim. We have like a core of like light armor-piercing infantry and cavalry, which is not something the Philothrim are particularly known for. And then you build that around a harassment army. So Berthombar spears will have a non-armor-piercing, just sort of like standard javelin. The Marines of Berthombar will become harassment javelins, and there's more of them in a unit. They haven't been brought down to the standard 120 size, so that's something that adds a little bit of flavor to the Philothrim and helps them use the bonuses they get to light infantry, especially the speed, a little bit better. And then you can pair that with archers and a solid bodyguard to give you that sort of command center morale support, which the Philothrim are known for. And yeah, then you just pick at people, and then when you're ready, you go in with the scouts, who are really good medium cavalry, and the maces you can actually afford to give like chevrons and attack upgrades to, so you can bump that attack value up to 10 AP, which gives you a solid core for your army, lots of ways to defend yourself, lots of spears, and a lot of harassment as well. And that's something you can't really do as viably as the Philothrim right now. And that'll open up further. I'll keep going on this for a few minutes, but I think you guys get it at this point. But that will open up further compositions in team games. Like, you could take that army and then go and pair that with a Syriand, and then you and your partner are fighting this like very fluid kind of back and forth skirmish game that can't necessarily last forever, so you have to make good choices with how you use your ammunition, but you have that option to be this like sort of flexible force, which isn't something the Philothrim can really do viably at the moment. So that's just one example of the changes that will kind of percolate down into the rest of the mod as a result of adding these new skirmishers, and putting this emphasis on terrain and stuff like that. I mentioned speed as well. I will say just a quick note on that. I'm adding mud to more areas, which will slow units down when you move through it. So that'll give those skirmishers an opportunity to pop some extra damage off, for you to capitalize on moving heavy infantry through a muddy terrain. And they'll allow you an opportunity to use those units rather than, heavy infantry barreling towards you at full speed, and then it's much harder to do that. Not every map will have this, because I don't want to turn the whole mod into like a skirmish meta. That's not what I want. As I said, I want it to continue to be infantry focused, but it will add options that will allow you to bring out those new builds that are enabled by the changes that we're making. So that's pretty cool. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the stream so far. I hope you guys are excited about Silmarillion. I will reiterate again, if you guys want to follow us, lots of information down in the description of all my videos. Easy to find our Instagram, our Discord. Highly recommend you join it and get involved in the community. That's the best way to find games currently. But there will also be a sort of showcase with Admiral Price, who is another YouTuber. Highly recommended that you go and check him out as well. Really nice, really reasonable guy. Smart guy as well. And yeah, we sat down, we did an interview. He's going to showcase the mod. There's a lot of things that I talk about in terms of like direction of campaign, especially. I do go into some detail in the campaign in that interview. and also just sort of general philosophy when it comes to balancing Silmarillion Total War, our system of soft counters, and things like that. So if that's something that interests you, highly recommended that you go and sub to his channel. It should be out tomorrow, assuming everything goes okay. He had a power outage recently, which like set him back on some work he had to do. But it should be out tomorrow around 11 o'clock. Hope you guys enjoyed the stream so far. Hope you'll go and check out that video. He will also be streaming the mod, and I will be joining him on stream. So if you guys enjoyed this and you can stand the sound of my voice, then that's something else you can do in the coming days as well. But in any case, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys have enjoyed this so far, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.